Ever wonder what really goes on in the world of offshore oil rigs, wind farms, and the energy industry that powers your life? Find the answers to those questions and more on the podcast Wind, Waves, and Wells with Joe. Wind, Waves, and Wells with Joe pulls back the curtain and shares the raw, unfiltered stories from the front lines of energy. From offshore drilling disasters to wind turbine advancements, Joe brings on people who've lived it, worked it, and have the scars or the laughs to prove it. When you tune into Wind, Waves, and Wells with Joe, you'll hear jaw-dropping experiences like being 100 meters underwater with no air, to real conversations about safety, environmental impact, and the politics that don't make it into the brochures. It's insight, storytelling, and sometimes controversy, and always honest. If you're an energy insider or just someone curious about the wild world that keeps the lights on, Wind, Waves, and Wells with Joe is the podcast for you. Available on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Real people, real stories, no filter. Wind, Waves, and Wells with Joe. Start listening right now.
How's Dubai?
How's Dubai? It's hot and sunny. Living the dream, some people would say, but different kind of dream from offshore. So in the UK certainly. So it's hot, but it started to cool down, and life here is overall positive. It's good.
Yeah.
For a minute.
How long have you been there?
I'm now 2.5 years, almost 3 years since moved out here. My family's been here as well, living with us, and it's just been what a journey, to be honest.
Yeah, we'll go through it throughout this thing. Finance, that's where you started, is it?
Yes. So I went to university. Initially, I was going to study a law degree, and then I ended up doing investment banking, finance. And then I started off working in the city of London. I worked for Shell Trading, and then that got me an offer during the 2007 and 8 crisis, which we may all remember. And within a year and a half, I had an amazing opportunity to become an engineer. So I started off in finance, looking to do budgets for chemicals, people, salaries, pipe schools, you name it. So a very different job to what I ended up doing when I was at Shell.
How did you go offshore, from being finance to offshore?
It's a question I get asked very often. It's very unconventional. So, I mean, first thing that happened was that I was a bit dissatisfied with where I was going to go on the graduate scheme, if I'll be very candidly honest here. I was going to go into group reporting or credit, and I thought, no, I like the dynamism of looking after real assets with real people on them. And I had done various kind of conversations with operations managers, asset managers, and head of departments and functions at Shell. And eventually I just got almost headhunted in a way, and I had an amazing conversation with a chap who became my mentor. And to this day, I speak to him, Chris Ray, who's now retired. And it was 8:00 at night, and it was just a hilarious conversation where I was thinking of leaving Shell. I was that fed up of, where I might end up. And he said to me, no. And I nearly spat my coffee cup onto his white shirt, pristine white shirt he was wearing that day, because he goes, Mandy, where do you think you're going to be going? And I had an offer from HP, not the Brownsforce guys, but, Hewlett Packard.
Yeah.
And they go, we'll up your pay and you'll move to Houston. And I thought, as a young man, single man, I'll move to the US and I'll do it a couple of years and let's see where it takes me. And then just on that Friday night in Aberdeen, working in the office, Chris just said to me, look, I have a vacancy in 3 months' time for a production supervisor on a certain FPSO, and I want you to be the man. And I nearly spat my coffee out on said white shirt. And he said, think it over the weekend. I spoke to my fiance at the time, and I said, this is one of those moments that transforms your career, and, it's not going to come about again, I don't think. And I really want to do it. I'm really technically interested in what this could lead to. And I came back on a Monday morning with my fiance, now my wife, saying yes as well. It's a family decision, and I never looked back. So, and it was born out of a desire just to take a step back. I mean, it came out of a desire that I really love the technical stuff. I don't just want to look at debits and credits and P&Ls and balance, all the magical words that people in the city look at or finance people look at. Important work, but I never want to be divorced away from the reality of where that money is being spent, as well as what's making us money. What's the whole purpose of what we're doing? And 90% of Shell is some kind of scientist or engineer, if I speak very candidly. So I was like, well, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. And I can really bring those two worlds together. That would make me somebody, quite not powerful, but somebody who'd have an integrated understanding of how a business really runs.
Yeah. And what was that like adjusting from going from working in offices in finance, totally different sector, to getting offshore?
Yeah, a huge change, complete change. I mean, one is my appearance, right? So you see this beautiful guy with a turban, right? So I never got rid of the beard, but when you're working with rotating equipment, pumps, compressors, valves, you've got to tie it, you've got to put it in or something like that. You can't get it trapped. That's the last thing I want. But the real thing, really seriously, was the turban thing, right? For Sikhs, we fought in World War One and World War Two, shoulder to shoulder with Great Britain and the UK and allies, and Sikhs fought in the wars without wearing helmets. But I took a very pragmatic view, and then obviously religiously as well. Sikhs can wear hard hats. My interpretation certainly can. It's a safety thing. So I'd wear like a bandana. Think of Hulk Hogan when he's wearing the black bandana kind of thing,
Yeah.
or on a Harley Davidson or something. So I'd basically have a black bandana, still covering my hair, and have my hair, tied up in a ponytail at the back. So. Which also drew some funny comments as well when I was offshore, which kind of introduced me to the banter of offshore as well. Where one of the guys said, "If I didn't know you were a guy and you're walking in front of me, I think you're a fit girl." Anyway, I don't think that's very true, but
he'd been offshore for a couple of weeks by that time, right?
yeah, anything goes. What happens offshore stays offshore.
One of them.
So now the truth is, I mean, it was worlds apart because I was working night shifts initially when I went full time offshore, and it's minus 15 degrees Celsius in the winter, or wind chill with wind chill factor. I was working on FPSO, so they're rocking about in the storm conditions, etc. You're trying to decant some lube oil or something into a tank. And it's completely different to sitting in an office where you've got the AC, temperature controlled. People are beating around the bush to give you a complicated message, and got endless meetings with the coffee in your hand. Offshore is a very different life. So I very quickly had to adjust to the culture of that. But it was amazing, and I went into it with my eyes open. I'll give you one quick anecdote here. So before I went offshore and I was approved, I had a very generous colleague called Alistair. I won't use his surname. So Alistair did a fantastic job, gave me a call and said, Mandeep, there's people who are very different to your background, so they come from the northeast of England or Glasgow, Dundee, all over Aberdeenshire, etc., all around the world even, and they don't have the same multicultural makeup, right? And he's kind of telling me a long story, and basically just wanted to see how would I adjust as a very different looking guy to an environment where I'd be in a very obvious minority here. And I just said to him, it's great. I'll be absolutely fine. Don't you worry about it. And it was the right question to ask. And I think a lot of people in HR or other places in leadership sometimes shy away from the difficult conversations to say, how are you going to be able to add value? How are you going to join the team, frankly? And would you have the right chemistry with people? And with me, I was quite lucky that from a young age, I was in the Air Cadets. I was often one of the only brown or colored or anything, stood out on a parade ground with, again, everybody's wearing a beret and I'm wearing a turban. So, very obviously different. But at the same time, I fit in after a few days, weeks, hours, people don't see it. And people said that to me quite often is that, I just, was quite cheerful and I joined in with the bands as well. So, it makes a difference. If you set yourself apart as a human, you're not gonna, you're gonna set yourself apart, and people are very wise to that. And it's, I think more conversation. This is a political statement. I think more conversations of different people working together, playing together, meeting together makes a huge difference, mate.
100%. Couldn't agree more. I'm going to ask the obvious question though, because it's going to be one that everyone's thinking. Did you ever experience racism?
No, I not directly at all. I don't think I did.
No.
I think that there was a certain exoticness about me. I would say. I had chefs who asked me, can you help us cook a curry? Because actually, three of them were absolutely horrendous. That's not a stereotype. And the answer is yes, I can cook bean curry.
Yeah.
So the tip is, guys, it's a
production operator by day, chef by night.
Chef by night. Yeah, it was a night shift. Funny enough, as well. Again, the chefs had a bit more time. But yeah, I mean, the people hadn't met. I mean, I had a number of conversations, different rigs, saying, we've never met a Sikh before. We've seen you in an episode of EastEnders or something as a Sikh in the pub or something, or we've seen you about, that kind of thing. We know you exist, but we don't know the difference between a Sikh or a Muslim, or what are you, or what do you believe, or what do you eat? I mean, I had, but most of the conversations, I mean, if not all, were respectful. I had guys on rigs who would bring a steak chips and whatever, and would sit across me and then say, "Oh, sorry, Mandy, we know you're a vegetarian." When they found out I was a vegetarian, hopefully this doesn't offend you. I said, "No, as long as it's not in my mouth, I'm absolutely fine." But the thing was, it was very respected. I remember. I mean, it's not very often that I'm very spiritual or full of prayer, And again, I had a guy come up to me. All I'll say is first name's Richard, Richie, who's a deck foreman on a certain rig, and he used to play cards, and they used to have small stakes. That's all I will say on playing poker or whatever. And he thought I was like the padre offshore almost, So he used to say, "Manny, can you come and he's bold, right? So he say, can you rub my top of my head? Can you bless me so I win this hand? It's 200 quid on me, right?" And I kid you not, is and pure chance, right? He won the 200 quid, and he still owes me a deal of that money for sure. If you're watching this, he should give me at least 50%. But because amazing conversation.
Interest.
Yeah. So people are curious, and likewise, I'll be honest with you. I grew up in West London, in a community in a town called Southall. I'm very proud of that. And Southall is spot the white guy. Literally, it's out of 200, 500 people, be one white person. And it's not a ghetto in any way like that. And the thing was that I realized truly how isolated I was in some respects, despite having a little bit of a slight Air Force or in the cadets kind of exposure to, let's say, the wider British white population, just to say how it is.
Yeah.
How much I was ignorant of many basic things in British culture. And I mean, this is almost going on to the political side of things, but I think really...
Yeah, I know.
And my people, the Sikhs especially, are very well integrated in Britain, but at the same time, there's a lot of things that I had to discover, and just to learn, there's small things, big things. Small things was like, about putting your cutlery away in a certain way. And, it's weird. Not that everybody's particular about it, but it was just small little things that over time that meant that I was always learning about, and they were learning about me as well. And to be honest, fundamentally, we all discovered that, we have the same likes and dislikes, and we all have a need to be loved and have a bit of have a laugh. We're all away from our families. We're all missing our girlfriends or wives or parents and kids. So we had a lot of commonality, and that fundamentally made a difference as well, because we all understood that.
I think that helps a lot, actually, that you are all, when you're offshore, you are all on the same page. Are you? I mean, everyone is in the same boat, so to speak. I think I've found out a lot more nowadays is getting on with people that you're with, and even having a bit more patience as well. If someone's having a bad day, helps a lot. Especially, you're all different shapes, sizes, and whatnot. But I think there is a massive commonality between everyone. I mean, you're only there for one reason, that's to make money. You're not there for the fun of things, so to speak, and you have to make the time of it when you're out there doing it. But I think that does probably help quite a lot.
I 100% agree, and I think that you can figure out if somebody's going to adjust to offshore life when they first start out within the first trip or first week. And one of my favorite things was to go outside, with another colleague outside, after shift, and if I could see that they were a bit stressed, especially when I became a supervisor, we'd take them outside and we'll just have a chat if it's a nice summer evening or something, and just have a chat. And the sea is extremely calming when it's and we don't often pay attention to that. But I just loved connecting with people from completely different walks of life to myself, people who were ex-Royal Marine Commandos, to people who grew up in council estates and broken homes. There's a female that comes immediately to mind who was a qualified lawyer, a Muslim woman who worked for one of the biggest law firms in the world and decided to pack that in and work offshore as a rope access technician. So, I met weird and wonderful people, amazing backgrounds, so offshore does give you an engineering career, especially offshore, does give you amazing opportunities. Never assume anything.
Yeah. How long did you do offshore?
Cumulatively, it was about 7.5 years or so.
Right.
That's a combination of also working in North Africa as well, in Egypt, which is quite a bit of fun as well. So just operations generally was about 7.5 years.
And then what happened next?
Yes. So from offshore, I got an amazing opportunity to join at the time Schlumberger SLB to work in a small consultancy that had been taken over. And I basically lived out of a suitcase, essentially, for the next almost 2 years. I got involved in something called digitalization, or in oil and gas. It's a brand new thing. It's about Internet of Things. It's about 3D printing of parts. It's drones delivering things offshore. It's like basically what is the art of the possible here. And finding oil and gas through using artificial intelligence and machine learning, and those are different terms, by the way. So that was something. I did that with Petronas in Malaysia. So I was basically living there for 3 weeks and then 1 week home, and basically having a very tough family life. Then I did that in Austria for OMV or OMV, in Vienna and in Norway. As well as Romania. So I was basically traveling around the world. I went to do some due diligence M&A type of valuations of oil and gas facilities in the middle of a desert in Algeria and Tunisia, and increase their production when they were only producing in one field. They were only producing 800 barrels a day, I remember. And I was like, and the place was rusting to bits, but they wanted to, rejuvenate that field for the country's economy if they could. But the thing was that at the same time in my personal life, my wife and I were trying to have a baby. And thankfully we were successful. I was in the middle of a desert. As a side tangent here, my phone had about 20, 25 missed calls. I remember very clearly. I came to my desk and I didn't even bother reading any messages on WhatsApp as we do, right? So I immediately called home thinking, there's an emergency. Now, when you're offshore, you're away, and you get that many calls on your phone, you think something's wrong, typically. And so anyway, I immediately called. I didn't check my phone or anything. I wish I had. Instead of the traditional greeting that I give my wife, it's a bit long-winded. Vaiguru Khalsa, Vaiguru Fateh. It's quite a long phrase. And my wife is quite studious with that. And she just shouted down the phone, nearly blew my eardrums. And she said, "I'm pregnant!" And I won't go into the mechanics of all that. But the point is, it was amazing. But I was in the middle of the desert. I was on the Zohar field in North Africa, in Egypt, and near Port Said, and with another 4 or 5 of us from the UK, with about 800 odd people from Egypt or neighboring countries, etc. And I had another 3 or 4 weeks to go before I could get home. So momentous stuff. But that's the kind of thing we miss when we're working away from. So that was next for me. So that was okay. Amazing, because I got involved in so many different things, but I was hardly home. And then that took me into consulting with EY, with Ernst & Young. So a totally different world again from offshore, getting into the corporate boardrooms and all of that. So and then that took me around in industry and consulting to where I am now.
Right. One thing I'm going to say, because I had a conversation with someone else on the podcast, is how much do you think it's helped you by diversifying yourself, by taking on roles in totally different areas, so to speak?
I think it's opened doors that I thought that would never be opened. If I continued with a finance career, which was very possible, I think I would have been kind of pigeonholed within the world of finance, and yes, I could have been happy and would have been fine. But the reality is that by working offshore, by working in oil and gas, it opened doors to work. I worked in nuclear. I worked in the defense and fast fighter jets for British Aerospace on a program there for a wee while. I worked in railways, so you can't blame me for the trains being delayed if you're anywhere near Manchester down to Birmingham. But Northwestern Central, looked at their maintenance program for their trains and the rail capacity there. I worked on London Underground and all of London, the train tickets that you buy, right, whether it's an Oyster card or a physical ticket. Looked at all of their machines and their maintenance and the pricing that they give to London Underground, TfL. Got involved in those contract negotiations. So, by working in a technical environment, especially when you change careers, you learn a lot by asking some basic questions. I give career advice. I do mentorship as well. So I always say to people, always ask who, what, where, when, how, and why. There's 6 W's, right? I mean, this is really key. I mean, I say this to every young graduate or anybody who's got a career aspiration or wants to change industries. Like, really understand, like, how is this product being sold? How is it being marketed? How is it being made? What's the supply chain here? What technology is involved? What sign-offs are there? How is it safe? And how can you prove all these elements? And how do they come together? And then how do they get marketed and then, sold? So having that integrated way, or I think of it like a spider web, right? It's one spider who's made something and, it's got to catch one fly. But there's so many webs that it's got to spread out and it's got to get to quickly to the bait. So the point is that you've got to think that everything's interconnected. And that's how my brain works. And it's opened doors through consulting where, if I applied cold to the NHS or GSK, GlaxoSmithKline, on the COVID vaccine rollout or the trains, etc., I think that going in cold is tougher. But by having a technical mindset as well as a commercial mindset, and then some digital stuff, I kind of mixed and matched. But by bringing it together, I think we interview really well. And I think that I encourage everybody to adopt that mindset. It's not always easy when you're trying to fix a pump and, thinking about where that pump comes from and all that, except, when it's not working and then you're trying to get a new one. But, if you get some idle moments to really skillfully get into the habit of thinking a bit wider than yourself or your discipline, and that interconnectedness is what then pushes you up. It's like plate tectonics, right? So they push together and eventually make mountains, right? And hopefully mountains go up, right? So that's how you've got to think of it.
I like the analogy of spiderweb one, actually. That's quite a good one. I'll give you that. How much is it connected, though? Working in the likes of nuclear, rail, oil and gas, all that. What was the connection?
Ooh, it's a challenging question. I think what connects the commonality, funny enough, is to do with safety. It's this phrase that I learned quite early on: chronic unease. Chronic unease. It's a really important phrase. And what does it mean? It's nothing to do with the bowel movements. To be honest, it's to do with never assuming today's safe shift guarantees tomorrow's. So it's really important. So never assume anything. That pump that you serviced yesterday, or that, valve that you turned, or that piece of pipe that's, you're walking by, is safe. At any one moment, something can go wrong. Now, it doesn't mean that you live in fear. You've got to build a level of trust with the systems that are in place and be aware of those systems. So think of it like an onion. I'm sure that this is used by many organizations. Step change in safety is a fantastic one. There's many organizations that talk about this, but really being aware. And I think that those in operations, the discipline I was in, production operations engineering, we understood that really well because we issue the permits. But I encourage electricians, instrument, deck crew, rope access people, all kind of disciplines to understand that, have that sense of, am I safe? Am I truly safe? Can I really verify that that's okay? Is that electrically cut off? Is there pressure behind that, whether it's hydraulic or pneumatic or, something? Does that pipe have something that's dangerous inside it? Does it have some gas in hydrocarbon gas in there, or some other gas that, you take 2 breaths and you're dead, or it compromises you? So within all these industries, railways and nuclear and defense, they have that. I think in railways, I give you one from a different industry. So they have something called near miss reporting. And oil and gas, we're supposed to do the same thing, is report near misses. But I think the way they do it is really exemplary. The data that they collect is really treated like gold. There's not a blame culture. I really haven't seen that in the railway industry. And I think that offshore oil and gas or wind turbines, etc., they could really adopt more of that transparency where that reporting of small slips is then rewarded and it's not feared. It's not like you did that or you should have seen that, or you weren't wearing the right boots and this is the reason why you fell down, or whatever. It might be small things, might be big things, but having that culture. And I know that, stop cards and whatnot can be seen as just, a waste of time by some people. But really, if you get all that data together, I'm going to give one insight I really believe in passionately. Even if you get the nonsense stuff in there, it does go to the management on your rig first, right? And then onshore to then weed out that stuff. And then you get real nuggets of gold in there. They're anonymous. if you want them to be. You don't need to sign them off. No company, I don't believe in the UK at least, forces you to sign your name on a stock card. It's still treated as serious, even if it's anonymous. So I get that from the rail industry, chronic unease, and then really near misreporting.
Is that probably the one thing you'd say that the oil and gas industry could probably learn then off the other industries? Yeah,
100%. Yeah, I think that's that cultural change, and I think that's not to not recognize where the oil and gas industry in the UK or elsewhere has gone. It's moved massively. I mean, even in the years I've done, only in the last decade or a decade and a half. So, and I think the other thing is that one other thing you could pick up, but not from a safety perspective, is the attitude to technology. I think just from a geographic perspective, I think that there's places in the east, like Malaysia was a good example for me. In the Central Europe, when it came to OMV, who are very pro technology. They didn't see it as a threat always, especially in Malaysia. They didn't see it as a threat to their jobs. They saw it as something supplementing their jobs. They're very pro gadget. Anything on a phone, a watch, or anything that they could do with a tablet. They were all into it. And I think that sometimes in the UK or Europe, I saw that in a client in Europe somewhere. The unions got involved within 2 weeks, saying that you're going to be cutting jobs. The rumor service, that generated. So there is something that we can learn from other industries, is to say, hang on, technology might actually get rid of the paperwork and all of the, not all, but a lot of the mundane processes, and they can be value adding and actually make your job more secure, actually. And those who actually, even in their 40s, 50s, who learn tricks with AI, etc., can really, fly in their careers as well, because they can do things. It's never too late. It's never too late. It's not just a 20-year-old something's game, honestly.
No, I totally agree with that. I'm all for picking up technology offshore, 110%. When the project I've just been on there's a small company that's on there at the moment who's really impressed me. We're installing monopiles at the moment, and they can basically dictate. They can work out if there's a pile run that's on its way. And it's really clever. You watch pretty much the exact examples of the pile going into the soil and whatnot. And yeah, I'm all for technology as well. I'm totally on board with that.
Yeah, I mean, I
don't think it's something to be scared of either. Like I do agree. Like, you're always going to still need people to go offshore. You can't. I don't think we've got the capability for robots to be at that stage yet. But yeah, I definitely think it's something to embrace.
100%. I mean, so I write a newsletter. So there's a shameless plug in here, right? But so I've been writing about.
Plug away.
Yeah, no worries. So it's called Mandeep's Reflections on LinkedIn. So feel free to add me on LinkedIn and subscribe. So I've been writing about some of my experiences about digitalization, Internet of Things, machine learning, and the real value already today we can see is that the companies who are adopting, let's say, machine learning. What is machine learning? Machine learning is essentially taking what you've already done, right? So all of the maintenance data, for example, across the disciplines, right? Say, pump, lube oil pump, ABC. You get that data off its pressure, its vibrations, its temperature vibrations, flow rates, etc. Right? You get all the inputs and outputs. You get that data, and how often has it been maintained? What's bearing temperatures, lube oil temperatures, whatever it is. You get all that information, and you then put it into a magic machine. Let's say machine learning, and it uses sensible algorithms to say what's happened in the past. How often has this thing failed? Right? And, if it's failed electrically in the past, if it's failed, because of hydraulics, it's failed because of some filters, is there a better way of maintaining this so it doesn't fail? Because the cost of failure is 6 times. This is a true stat. On average, you're paying 600% or 6 times more to replace a piece of equipment than it is to just maintain it. So if we're talking about, rigs coming to the end of their life or midlife, getting towards the end, this makes a huge difference to the economic viability of that rig continuing operations, is to be able to just repair things in time, before they fail. So we're seeing now truly real big numbers. You start to save millions of pounds or dollars just by having machine learning. But then you've got the Internet of Things, which then is kind of automating the ordering of, let's say, spare parts and maintenance activities, etc. as well, and connecting them through Wi-Fi or near-fi, the various different technologies that can connect things wirelessly to then actually then be able to give you predictive information and again, operate things remotely as well. So not all of these things are adaptable to old places that are producing, but sometimes you find a new field, you get it connected to an old field. We saw that with the Montrose Alpha. They found a giant discovery of oil and gas. I was working on that project. That rig was already 40 years old. I was there on the 40th anniversary of the Montrose Alpha in the UK North Sea. And they had it was worth spending £5.5 billion plus on a new bridge link platform, to go to the old one. And the old one, I was working as operations readiness team leader. The old rig also had to be significantly upgraded as well to handle the new capacity to export back to shore. So a 40-year-old rig was going to get a minimum of 20, 30 plus years of extra production. So you've got to use new technologies in old places as well sometimes. Incredible stuff.
I've been on that Montrose.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, I'll say no more.
No, well, there are some positives and negatives. No.
Yeah. Middle East, that's where you are now. How was that? How's that going from obviously growing up in the UK, being from the UK, and then I take it you moved your family out to the Middle East?
Yeah, I mean, it came quite suddenly for us. So about 3 years ago, I was headhunted by a talent acquisition person, and they had an incredible opportunity to work with Petrofac. I know Petrofac from the UK. Petrofac UK and Petrofac based in Sharjah, another emirate in the United Arab Emirates. I run very differently, I would say that. But it was a great opportunity for me and my family because my wife's originally from India, so her parents are now in their 70s. So also from a family perspective, it would be great to get closer to my in-laws who are getting older, but also the children to experience a different culture. And then from a professional perspective, my wife and I wanted to experience that. So, we moved out in 2023, and it's been a transformative experience for us as a family as well, both positively, and also there's been some rough times as well, no doubt as well.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's a big move, though, isn't it? It's a big move.
Yeah, I mean, packing your life up, and moving across to a place where I've only been here twice before on 1 week visits, is totally different. I mean, culturally, it's different as well. The scale of ambition in the Middle East, especially in Saudi and United Arab Emirates and Qatar, in particular, what I've experienced is phenomenal. They want the sheer pace of decision making that they've got is incredible. They want speed and agility. They're not interested in having hundreds of layers of approval processes. Whereas in the UK, we're much more collegiate. We have governance, we've got HSE, we've got to take things into consideration. It takes time. It doesn't mean one is better than the other. It's just where the difference is. Only 40 years ago, majority of Dubai and in the United Arab Emirates was covered in sand, right? So they built this metropolis, extremely advanced adoption of new technologies, innovative architecture in a very short amount of time, and it's an amazing thing. And I sometimes want that secret sauce to come to the UK, but without compromising some of the values that we have or around safety or. There must be some middle mix somewhere where we can transform things in the UK as well. But the UK is an old country, right? So different flavors.
It's a lot harder. Yeah, I think it's because the foundations are a lot more embedded in the UK in terms of the way they've gone. I guess, so to speak, with most of the Middle East, having been there for 18 years, I know my mind when I was there, Dubai wasn't it was building up, but it was nothing like it is now. But I guess they almost got a clean slate, so to speak, to kind of build off the back of. Whereas the UK's kind of had to. There's a big foundation in place that you've got to continuously keep building on top of.
Yeah, I mean, I was working on, funny enough, on the HS2 program when I was at EY.
Yeah, maybe a bit then.
What can I reveal?
That's one foundation that's never getting a house built on it at this rate.
Well, I think the teams were trying to fight a very honest battle at HS2, honestly. But the thing is, I think the government There's a lot of things that could be said about the government and also estimation of times and processes. But truly, I mean, it's a good example. I was working with the team that was doing the routing, and they would find as they were digging and excavating, old battle sites, or they'll find, a huge amount of history along the way. And there will be like some protected species of some gnat or some newt or some very rare thing that you had to protect, And yes, if you go to China or other places, arguably they would say, no, we're bulldozing our way straight through.
Carry on, lad.
Carry on.
I'm not giving a crap about no newt.
Yes, bad news is newt. But but in a way, I mean, I studied history at A level, and so it's not a big credential, but I still read a lot, and
yeah,
I don't know. There is a balance of something that's historically important and how you preserve that for the future. There's some value there, and then there's a value of what the tomorrow and the future looks like. So how much do you hold hostage, or how do you quickly make a decision about what you keep and how you keep it and where you keep it? Because they have to be kept. I don't know. And there's much more PhD, professors, etc., who can make that decision. But I think that HS2 is a good example. Overall, my intrinsic feeling of where, as a nation, when it comes to big capital projects, we always have cost overruns. With even nuclear, we have the same issue, and so there's a skepticism from investors. Now, I'm going to put my finance turban on here. If you're an investor, you want one, regulatory certainty, whether it's the oil price or taxation, right? Which is being talked a lot about on LinkedIn, especially when it comes to UK fiscal regime. But you also need kind of certainty around what the rules and governance and processes are, right? So that you can get something progressed and made. And if you're putting billions of pounds in, you've got to figure out a way of supporting a capital project. If that's what you're going to do, you've got to be very clear what the end goal is and how you're going to get there. And I think that that's where politicians, program managers, directors, etc., get their knickers in a twist, to put it politely.
Yeah. So obviously, before you come on, I've got to ask a bit about you because I don't like going in too blind. One of the things that kind of came up, actually, I'm not sure if it was you or was it when I was stalking your LinkedIn profile, was that you've led billion-dollar programs before. How was that?
Oof. There's an incredible amount of pressure that comes from that. And the pressure is also from, I'll talk about this very candidly, internally. And I write about this as well. I call it, I only found out a few years ago, listening to a speech by Michelle Obama, something called imposter syndrome. And then I did a bit of research about it. And I've always had it. I've always had this feeling, especially when I moved from finance to engineering, that I've got many eyes on me, that are watching in expectations of either I will trip up or I will do well, or there will be some kind of agenda before I walk in. But myself, this is the internal pressure I feel that I need to make a difference straight away. And when the truth is that I've gone through a selection process of some kind to lead a complex business, and that I need to take the time to, understand who the people are, what they've been doing beforehand. There's already some trust in the organization there. And, that the impact I need to have does not need to be almost immediate, that I need to live up to the paycheck I'm getting or the position that I have. So it's incredibly, I would say, a humbling experience as well when you're working on, like I mentioned, worked offshore, or it was working in the HS2 program, or it was COVID vaccine rollouts, or the big digitalization programs for both ADNOC and Petronas and OMV, various companies, So, it gets a little bit easier as you go along. But I would say internally, I'm always feeling that, I need to connect with the people at the most junior levels as well. So I still continue to mentor people. I don't, generally charge anybody for that. I really, also, I create the space for people to speak honestly to me. It's really important that my direct reports and those below them can feel that my door is open and they can come to me and say that there is an issue. So I'll give you one example where I think it's one of my proudest achievements in my career, came from a very, I didn't realize at the time that I've been creating these kind of safe environments for people to speak their minds, right? I kind of always been quite flat in my mind how I speak to people. Quite. What I mean by flat is there's no airs and graces with me, right? I don't believe anybody's more superior to me or anybody below me. I genuinely believe that. I've been raised that with my parents, thankfully. And I was doing this risk assessment training every night, almost a thankless task, to get people signed off as a performing authority to take permits out. Where, as we all know, when you work offshore, you need to be able to take out a permit. And somebody must have believed the words I literally said, that, guys, if you got an issue and you don't feel comfortable speaking to your supervisor or manager, come to me and I will listen. I'll give you a fair hearing, and and then I'll weigh it up and see what I can do to help you. Now, I used to say that almost as a script, but I really believed in it. So what very quickly happened was that on my last full day offshore on a certain rig, I won't name it, I had two men walk into my porter cabin office on this project, and they said, Mandeep, we've gone out and inspected a pipeline, a pipe that's 32 inches, 36 inches diameter, massive pipeline. It's going to be getting virgin pressure from the reservoir of gas, and we're going to be commissioning today to bring on first gas. So I was going to be really happy because I was thinking, well, today we're going to get first gas. This is my last trip offshore. That's a big achievement, right? Very expensive project. And I said, what's the issue then? They go, well, on this drawing or this PNID, there's supposed to be a flange, right? That's been pressure tested and everything that's been fitted. But we've walked there doing a line walk and it's open. And it's going to kill someone or it's going to blow us all up, right? They just told me very bluntly. And I said, okay, have you told the operations team? Have you told, that the rest of the team you're working with? Yeah, they're not interested, right? That was the honest answer. I said, so you want me to escalate this up? They go, yep, please, if you could, And we all have a shared interest in living, right, for another day. We don't want another Piper Alpha or any other disaster, to be honest. So I said to them, guys, respectfully, can you walk me to that place? Because you'll find it quicker than I will, because they were working on there. And I'll do the line walk myself, independently, but just walk me up to that place, okay? I'll get my bearings and everything. I did that, and I found the same thing that they had found. I then phoned up the operations team leader, the deputy OIM. He told me to fuck off, or told me to get lost.
That's good of it.
Mind your own business. We're starting gas mandate. Mind your own business. Nothing to do with you. You just need to sign the piece of paper. So I had to ultimately sign off to say the plant is ready. So I had some power, but it was his plant on his side. This is about interfaces, right? So he's got his responsibility. And yes, I shouldn't have too much to say about it, but I found something really concerning. Anyway, I calmly then explained to him, using all my energy, to say, this is really important. Come downstairs, or can you send two of your guys to verify the same thing, or disprove it? I'm happy if I've got egg on my face. I don't mind. Anyway, he told me again, fuck off, Mandeep, and he slammed the phone quite hard down. Now, I had a moral choice to make there. Do I back down? None of my business. Or do I escalate onshore? Right? That my direct boss was onshore. So, and that was a very senior person. I made the phone call. He asked me a few times, was I 100% sure? Because this was going in front of the vice president of the company. Everybody was expected in the boardroom to, celebrate this great achievement of first gas. Is only a couple of hours away. Okay, final checks. Okay, and he was waiting for my signature as well. I still hadn't signed yet. So he said, when are you going to sign? I said, well, we got to deal with this issue. So long story short, I told him. He then spoke to the VP. VP gave him a bit of a grilling, but they backed me. Fundamentally, they backed me. Ordered that production team leader to send two guys out. They verified it was open, and it stopped the job. So the delay to first gas was, I think it was about a day and a half, 2 days, because they actually had to then fit on the flange, had to pressure test it and everything else, verify everything was fine, get everything then signed off again, lined up to get first gas offshore. I didn't see first gas on my last day because I was on the next chopper the next day, first thing in the morning. But I was given a phone call the day after to say that that they did have a successful startup, no hiccups, and that they were very thankful for my intervention. And that if I hadn't spotted with the two gentlemen, I must admit, the open-ended flange, no doubt that there would have been a significant uncontrolled release of hydrocarbon gas. And I say, it's in God's hands if that platform would have survived, if I'll be honest, or what safety measures would have to come in after the event. So having integrity about you is really important. And yes, that incident for me highlighted the importance as leaders or managers or team leaders or guys on the front line who don't have any stripes on their shoulders, the importance of speaking your mind. If you're not sure, you must press the red button. You must raise your voice. Everybody, I used to say to everyone, even if you're the chef, somebody who makes up the beds or does your laundry, it doesn't matter. They can all stop the job. They see something unsafe, they can all press the red button. No consequences if it's an honestly held belief. It's a very important message.
Yeah, I'm totally on board with that. Sometimes I feel, and there's something about offshore. Sometimes there's people who are just generally blunt to the point, say it how it is. But you do get the people that they've got like this change in personality when they're speaking to certain people, or they're doing certain things to please them. Because they think that it buys them a lot more praise and stuff. But I think I'm under the exact same impression. You speak to the steward the same way you speak to the captain or the OAM or anything like that, and I don't think any worry should come under that. I think you have to really just be yourself, because I think at the end of the day, I think people appreciate you a lot more if they know it's you that they're speaking to and not someone who's been put on for a certain role, so we say. I know a lot of people call it ass kissing. I think it is. It's a bit more than that. I think a lot of people, especially offshore, worry a lot about their job, just because it is a hire fire kind of industry at certain times. Obviously, we're going through a bit of an unfortunate one in the UK at the moment. But I think, if anything, keep the integrity of who you are. I really do think that, like I am a bit of a class clown at times offshore, but I think that's just the way I am. I think having 4 kids probably helps that a lot. But yeah, I don't think you should change for anyone. Just say how it is. Do what you're good at. If you know you're good, you'll be all right. And I think, yeah, I'm totally on board. Just don't change for someone who's in a higher position to you, because I don't know if it. Maybe there is probably people that have done pretty well off doing it, but I don't know if it serves you well in the grand scheme. But then again, if you're getting paid extra, who might say?
No,
Case doesn't get more. I don't know.
No, I definitely agree. I think there's a cultural thing as well in the Middle East and in Asian culture as well. I'll mention, which is the opposite, which is, in general, not always, but in general, people are a bit more pliant as well. Okay, and there's a lot more trust given or following orders from somebody who's in a position of authority, right? Or somebody perceived to be in a position of authority. They come from a different culture. They come from a different social strata. Okay, there's all kind of complexities in that. And the thing is that when you are in a position of being a supervisor or superintendent or manager and above, you have a duty. I genuinely believe this. You have a duty to create that culture, at least around you, in the bubble that you or the rig that you're on. You have a duty to create an environment where people can speak their minds, or that you ask them questions. So you don't just take silence as a yes and say, what do you really think? Do you think it's safe? Is it a safer way? Or ask open-ended questions. If they're not comfortable being put on the spot by saying a yes or no, then ask an open-ended question. Could it be done safer? Instead of saying, is it safe? Are you happy to do that job? Instead of asking those questions, it says, how would you do this in a safer way? And then genuinely listening to what they have to say. Even if some nonsense comes out, it's just building trust that it's safe for them to speak. My maths teacher had this on our board, and she never practiced this, I would say. I won't say her name, but she used to have on her board, and it really left an impression on me. The only stupid question is the one you don't ask. Really. Yeah. It is a really powerful one.
Yeah, there's no such thing as stupid questions, only stupid answers. Yeah, I go by that as well. At least, even if you think you sound stupid asking it, at least you've asked it and you've worked out what you need to do.
Correct.
Egos, though, isn't it? I always think egos are a nightmare. I think if people can park it and just accept that it's not the end of the world if you ask something that might make you look like a dickhead or a fool or something like that, at least you're better off for asking it.
Well, that's the secret of my somewhat success in my career. It really comes down to the ego piece. I am if you speak to any of my colleagues or most of my colleagues, I'm genuinely happy to say I don't know something. But I'll go and find out, or I ask those 6W questions, right? Who, what, where, when, and how, and why. But it starts from the premise of I'm going to ask lots of questions. So my mother, used to, there's an IKEA in northwest London, I think on the A406, and on North Circular Road, right? And I used to go to my cousin's house every weekend, and apparently when I was a 2 or 3 year old, I used to always say IKEA, IKEA, IKEA. And IKEA sounds very similar to IKEA in Punjabi, the other language I speak, right? And IKEA in Punjabi means, what is that? And my mom used to drive me crazy. Always ask me, what is it? What is it? What is it? She goes, I'll tell you what that thing is, and you ask again what that same thing is. And she used to drive me up the wall. But my mom said that, that the thing was, I never stopped you asking questions because I knew that this is how you're going to learn, and how I need to encourage you, not to silence you, but I need to encourage you to flower by using your voice. So again, I take that home example from me being a 2-year-old to this day, that I need to use my voice to ask and be humble and say, I don't know. I don't have an ego to this. Like, should I know that how a gas compressor runs, all the intricacies of that complex piece of machinery? No. To this day, I can't tell you fully how a gas compressor A to Z works, right? I do know, but not A to Z, right? Now,
No.
But I knew enough to run a plant and to do so safely, right? And to ask the right questions before I signed any permit off, whether it was a wash or it was some electrical maintenance, some pump compressor, it was some change out of some valves, I knew more than enough, but ask the questions, never assume anything.
Yeah, I think one of the really good things that Richard Branson actually spoke about it, because he didn't know the difference between gross and net, and he went and asked, I can't remember the full story, but he went and asked the boy in finance or something like that, or one of his advisors, what was the difference, and they had to show him in on a drawing and stuff like that. But one of the things he says is I never ever think about the stupidity factor of it, because the fact of the matter is okay, someone might think you're a dickhead, or someone might try and be funny about it after, and then eventually they'll come around to answering your question. The fact of the matter is you're that one bit smarter that day because you now know. And I think if you can park the fact of being worried about how you look, the fact of the matter is your own benefit in it. Your own benefit's going to get from it. I ask when I'm offshore, like, even if it's got nothing to do with me, I'll go and ask what they're doing this and that, because the fact of the matter is you're that one bit clever that day because you found out something extra. I think it goes a long way. I really do.
Yeah, actually, you just reminded me of a conversation on the Anasaria FPSO, in case you've been there.
I have. I've been on the Anasaria, actually. Yeah, I have been on the Anasaria. It's his own company name now or something like that, is it?
That's correct. It's the Anasaria.
Yeah. I've been on there. Yeah.
So it used to be part of Shell, and it was the last offshore installation I worked for directly for Shell. And there was just a conversation going on about is there's a Meki who was saying to one of the operations guys, I don't know what that bloody pump does. It was a seawater cooling pump, right? And a seawater lift pump. Sorry, I correct myself. So a seawater lift pump. And he goes, I don't know what the hell it does. All I know is that I've just got to do some basic maintenance on this damn thing, right? And it just struck me. This guy had worked on the Anasaria for more than 10 years, and that he had no clue. He said, in fact, I know literally nothing about it. He said, I don't even care. And that struck me as a very odd thing, And I was being mentored as a supervisor at the time. And I said to the mentor, I was like, is it very often the case that people don't care what they're working on? Like, they only care about their discipline. If it's an instrumentation guy, all he cares about is the instrumentation part and is electrically isolated. If the Meki, all he cares about is that, is his scope. Because Mandeep, unfortunately, a lot of people are like that. They just don't have the time or the interest, right? But he said those who do take an interest, they're spotted very quickly and they get an offer from Shell directly to come and join the team.
Yeah.
So there was an instrumentation guy. I'll say his first name was Callum. So Callum was a great instrument guy, a certain rig I worked on. And Callum took a real interest in how operations ran. But he's an instrument tech for Wood Group PSN at the time. And he came across and he was offered a promotion to be an instrument supervisor at Wood Group PSN. He took a demotion to then work for Shell. Things only because we saw that one, he fitted in because he asked a lot of questions and he fit in from a banter perspective as well. But he took a real interest in how the place operated, and he joined straight from being an instrument guy, going for a promotion, to being an operations technician as well. So, and he would have a career that goes up and up and up as well. So again, understanding 10% more or one thing extra a day, you work 200, 220 days offshore a year or whatever it is, whatever proportion of the year people work on their shifts. If you can understand one thing extra as outside of your discipline, you go places very quickly.
We'll go back to your offshore time, actually, because obviously that's probably a big highlight of your career in that. But is there anything that stood out that gave you a bit of a laugh when you were there? We had a conversation on the phone actually before this one, and that was.
I'm on a podcast, and anybody could be watching this, right? Yeah. There's plenty of things. In terms of things I can share. I'm just saying that. I mean, I give you some daft ones. I mean, there's a certain James I worked with. Thankfully James is a very popular name. So this chap, we had a job on a certain normally unmanned installation. A water injection platform somewhere in the UK North Sea, and there's new regulations that come out at the time. I think it was Cap 437 or something to that tune, where you had to have the letter H with a circle around it, a certain size and font, and you had to have your nav aids, visible from a certain distance, and you had to do regular maintenance. But because it was an NUI, it wasn't very far away from the other platforms nearby, but also not far from land. That's the only clue I can give. Okay, and it had probably the most copious amounts of seagull guana, seagull shit, for those. I'm not used to the terminology. Excrement on his heli deck, right? So it had to be scrubbed clean, and it had to be repainted that wonderful green, that Wimbledon, as well, and then have the H and
bit of yellow, white or whatever,
right. So this certain James had a certain reputation. Now he's extremely hardworking. So if he's listening to this, I have a lot of time and respect for him. His productivity was very, very high, but it didn't mean that his productivity is matched by let's say common sense,
his intelligence.
Yeah. Right. So and I don't think James would begrudge me that, but I enjoyed working with the chap. I must say that right now. So he took a flight, 8-man team, goes across to this NUI, lands on board, and everybody's got to work very intensely in the daylight hours. Okay, so you've got you get 4 or 5 hours, highly productive time. So James gets on and says, right, you've got to. So they had already the day before. This is the second day, right? So he'd already been familiar with the place and had already brushed off all the guana that they could, right? And then they washed it down, and now it's dry. So the next job was to paint that wonderful Wimbledon green, right, on top of the heli deck, right? So what does James do, right? So he literally painted himself into a corner. So it's about lunchtime, so everybody's gone off to lunch, right? And James like, oh guys, I'll join you later, I'll whatever. And it's pot noodles, no joke. It's pot noodles, here crisps, and maybe there's chocolate milk that I'm having here. Anyway, moving on. One I prepared earlier, Blue Peter moment. Anyway, so. Yeah. So anyway, James working on his own. He's got this paint roller going across the heli deck, and he starts from where you disembark from, right? Thinking, oh, that's logical. So he starts painting, etc. And he gets, like I said, he's hardworking, right? And he gets himself right to the nets. So if for those who work offshore and those who don't, you have nets with a hexagonal shape that goes around, right? Okay. And so he starts painting, and he's gone away. And the guys go, mate, we've got your food ready and everything out. And the next thing they know, he's like, I can't join you. And so he's shouting across this heli deck. They go, what's wrong with you? And he's basically right. He's literally got almost 1 foot hanging off. That's all I would say. Almost 1 foot hanging off, and going straight into the North Sea. right? Was he wearing a harness or anything else like that? I leave that to your imagination.
Yeah, of course he was. Yeah, he was. Yeah.
Yeah. And he was like, I can't come on because the paint's wet, and it just rolled over laughing, So, we would have to switch it's all of the crew. Just a reminder of situational awareness, really. That's a story I can freely share. I mean, there's a few others, small ones, like there's somebody who decided to demonstrate to me who did not know. One of the things I didn't know about British culture or Scottish culture or Glaswegian culture was about this fried Mars bar concept, right? I had no clue about, right? And they were like, no, this is a real thing. I said, no, it can't be a real thing. And he literally night shift again, decides to go into the galley and fry a Mars bar. But the problem is, what I didn't realize is that it set off the GPA alarm. And this is at 2 a.m. And he was the most unpopular person the next day because everybody had to wake up and muster up, and wake up the OIM and everybody, because everybody thought, there's a fire on board, So things like that.
Did you get your Mars bar though?
Yes.
Yeah. One of the things I found is, especially this, I've just done quite a long trip myself with some of the same boys, is the camaraderie aspect, especially if you're around guys that you've been working with for quite a while that you know well. How much do you notice that in comparison to the other industries you worked in?
Yeah, I think the closest, or the only other place in my life that I've experienced the camaraderie you get offshore is in the military. At least from the stories I hear, and a little bit of time I've spent on bases, in Royal Air Force bases or Army bases in the UK. But nothing else in Civvy Street, as they would call it, comes close to the camaraderie you can get offshore, for sure. In my mind, if I quickly think, there's like this old school crane operator that could, do amazing things in terms of swinging a 10-ton load, with millimeter precision. There was like I mentioned, Richie, who thought I was like a padre offshore, to, guys who, there's always a deck crew joker. There was a guy called John Licorice. I'm happy to say his full name. He was a guy who played the chanter, bagpipes offshore, middle of a night shift in the control room. While he's controlling the plant, he would just...
As you do.
Right?
Yeah.
Incredibly skilled guy, and I think he still to this day goes to the Highland Games and plays bagpipes, etc. I mean, the personalities and the camaraderie offshore was something, and I think that's something that I think the older hands, as I was getting towards the end of my time offshore, was saying was something that was beginning to go away, actually. So about the younger generation,
I agree with that.
That because of what people perceive fear from HR, or there is a real fear that if a practical joke goes too far and it gets to the beach, gets to onshore in the office, in the cold light of day, without understanding the behaviors of offshore life, and if it comes to somebody who's not worked offshore before or it's been too long, that the context is missed and somebody will lose their job. So that level of banter, camaraderie, practical jokes. I was sent up on a Yanasuria, funny enough, is not super high like a steel platform, but on April Fools, not knowing it was April Fools, it just when you're offshore, dates don't matter really, except Chopper's Eve, right? And literally radioed, man, there's a leak, and all I had was a gas detector on me, and I literally had to run to the top of the turret on the Yanasuria. And literally, what did I find? There was a physical vegetable leak, waiting for me there. I got you, mate, on the radio.
Yeah.
Small thing,
I totally agree. And I actually had this conversation with a boy that I was working with just this last trip. Both of us quite fortunate to catch that older generation of lads. Obviously, they're a lot more harder lads, should we say, than the kind of what's coming through now. But their ways of teaching you and their ways of kind of breaking you in were far too superior to some of the guys that are out there now. It was tougher in terms of the way they treat you. They probably don't treated you in the nicest possible ways. But I think when it came to having your back, there was no doubt that they were 100% there.
Yeah, I think some
And
of
I
it's
think,
the government policy. I'll just interject if you don't mind. So Shell
yeah,
and BP both had. So this is before my time, so I'm not that old, right? Despite all the white hairs I've got in my beard now.
so I've got grey hairs as well. I wouldn't worry about that.
You're disguising them well. So
Yeah, I've just had to cut them off.
all right, well, we'll use vegan.
Yeah.
The so Shell used to have, and I think BP as well had their own college. They had the set scheme as well. They used to take a whole intake of I don't know how many dozens or hundreds of people a year and train them in the disciplines through an apprenticeship scheme, a true apprenticeship scheme. And I worked with a lot of those guys, that generation. I've been very blessed with that. They were my mentors. So Ray Taylor gets a shout out, Chris Ray gets a shout out, many others that basically had that intense training together. So they had camaraderie built into the college, but then went offshore together as well onto different rigs. And they got to, there's a lot of cross fertilization of knowledge and camaraderie and friendships and networks and spotting talent early. And he's going to go places and watching out for each other as well. And they got to know each other's families often. I've been to some reunions as well with Shell, Curlew Send-Off. I met Ray after quite a few years as well, and quite a few of the Maersk Curlew staff. I worked there as well on the FPSO there, and real camaraderie. And I think that the investment in apprenticeships, in the 1980s was fantastic, and then it went downhill. I think that there's a lot to do with tax policy or some kind of incentivization that needs to happen for the next generation as well, for sure, across industries, for sure. I see it in the nuclear, I see it in the defense industry. I had the head of engineering at British Aerospace, I won't name her, who said to me, Mandeep, I need to find 200 engineering graduates a year. I need to find 200 engineers a year. I must find them. I don't know where I'm going to find them from, and we're talking about super advanced 6th generation fighter jets. This is our national security. And we also have to think of national security in terms of our energy security as well. And I see that a lot online as well. And people are getting demoralized, but we need to think about the next 20, 40, 50, 100 years. And I'm a big fan of, yes, hydrogen. I'm a big fan of, yes, electrification and everything else. But at the same time, and wind turbines and renewable energy, I'm a big fan of it all. But oil and gas definitely has to be part of the mix, and sustainably so. And part of the UK as well. I will argue that very profusely as well.
Yeah, no, 100%. I'm an advocate for energy security as a whole. I don't think it really matters where it comes from, but if you've got cheap energy, you can build an incredibly strong economy off the back of it. We've seen it in the past; it's proven. But not just that, reliance. If you become reliant, and we saw it with the Russia situation, if you become reliant on other people to fund your energy, you are very, very vulnerable. Very vulnerable. And I don't think it's really quite, for some strange reason, it doesn't seem to be working here in the government with understanding that. But we're very reliant on external sources for energy. And then I could go on about the current regime for a while, shall we say. But Great British Energy is, for example, let's just use this one. I saw a post on LinkedIn the other day. I commented on it as well, just saying I think the issue with Great British Energy is going to be reliant totally on government subsidies, which is great from the start, but you can't keep relying on it, and you can't keep taking taxpayers' money to keep funding things that are not going to bring in investment on the same and one whole. And if you have a more diverse profile, let's say, you put money into nuclear, you put money into oil and gas, you put money into renewables, and you spread your risk, I think that'll be far more lucrative in the long run than just hedging all your bets on one particular energy source. That would be my only thing. Although I work offshore, so who am I? But that would be the kind of way I would look at this Great British Energy. I think it's a good idea. I do think it is a good idea from Labour, and that's not often I would say something about Labour, but I don't think the approach is the greatest.
I think that you got to think multi-generationally. I agree with you. I think that, GB Energy is a good idea. I think so. If we go back to the 1980s, and it's a long time ago, I was in my nutties still. But there's a company called Britoil. So Britoil, it was what Equinor is today. So it was set up to be a national oil company where the government would have a stake in the field, obviously, or 100% owned, and it would then. But then the argument goes that should governments be involved day to day in the running of a private business? And I think there's a happy hybrid there somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Long story short, we all know, those who've been in the oil and gas industry, that each molecule of oil and gas doesn't just give you energy from a power generation perspective. It gives you the plastics, across a whole range of different types of plastics. It gives you the nylons. It gives you, feedstock that goes into pharmaceuticals, and so all these are critical industries that you want to control in your own backyard, in your own supply chain. And I talk about supply chain resilience as well, is another thing that I've been involved in. But it's really important to have them. And at the same time, we can't be. I'm a big supporter of the British government in supporting Ukraine, right? That's my personal political stance on it. But I think at the same time that we need to, as Europeans or as obviously British people, we need to also be cognizant that we can't just be funding Ukraine and at the same time be funding Russia indirectly by buying Russian oil that goes to Indian refineries.
Exactly.
It just doesn't make sense. Okay,
No.
they are still making a lot of money and funding their war effort because we're still fueling our cars or fueling our refineries or using their products effectively just through a third country. So Russian oil goes to an Indian refinery and is bought by Britain or by European country, France or Germany or whoever. It's still Russian oil effectively, and it's still getting the money as well. So it just needs to be a well integrated, understood thing. It doesn't require heaps of equations and heaps of process diagrams that I've done endless amount of. It's just having an integrated understanding. What do we need, and have an honest conversation with the British public as well as to what we're doing, what the benefit is. Not double speak, just plain speaking that this is what we're going to be doing. And Keir Starmer should be more eloquent than most, given that he's a lawyer by background. But we'll see. I'm not politicizing it with Labour versus Conservative versus Reform versus Liberal Democrats or Greens or SNP, etc. Whatever flavor, right? I have a political opinion on most things, which I've mostly skipped away from in this podcast. But really, for what is best for Britain, is to have, as much highly skilled manufacturing in the UK. We still make the wings for Airbus, things like that, high tech stuff. We make, in Derby, I think, near Nottingham, we got Rolls-Royce, amazing stuff that they're working on as well. British Aerospace making, nuclear submarines for Australia and many other countries, making warships and whatnot. What we do is not the cheap stuff. We're not going to be making bog roll and pencils and things like that. We should understand that yes, there is a global supply chain, so it's not about going down the route the Americans at the moment currently are taking, which is just about ensuring all jobs to the US as much as possible.
Yeah.
There's a point there, right? It's
There's got to be a balance.
It could be a balance. And what is it that what are our strengths? It's basically SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Just understand what is it that we really need and what are we really good at, and what do we need to critically keep in house. Remember, we're an island nation. Hitler understood this very well, although thankfully he lost. But we only have in the UK, I think at that time was like 6 weeks worth of supplies. So if anybody did a naval blockade or a submarine blockade of the UK, we'd be in trouble. Now, I'm not saying that our supply chains are that at risk right now, but it can be, and COVID showed that. So we need to really have an honest conversation in the country as well, and share with the people what the vision is. And I don't see that often. I still vote in the UK, by the way, so it doesn't matter. I'm based in Dubai. I still have a stake in the UK. I pay British taxes as well. So before anybody says, "Oh, you're living the high life in Dubai," I still pay UK taxes. For various reasons. But I deeply care. At the end of the day, I'm British, and so that sits at home for me.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's one of those things, isn't it? I grew up out in the Middle East, but the fact of the matter is every summer you had to go home, and the UK was home, and so it's I imagine it's probably a similar kind of mindset with yourself. Is that okay, you're in the Middle East now, but most people that go from Britain or whatnot always they're going to go back home at the end of the day, do they? And so Yeah, I don't blame you. One of the things we spoke about just briefly earlier was identity and imposter syndrome. And you've spoken about being brown, bearded, and obviously wearing a turban. How much has that helped you in terms of offshore work? And do you ever think you had to prove yourself a bit more?
Quite a few questions there. So I think that, as I said earlier, there was a lot of curiosity in me. And I think that there's also curiosity that came from the fact that before I got onto many rigs, LinkedIn had started at that time, and people were like, why is this finance guy coming offshore? So
Yeah.
I had it both ways, from a skepticism or curiosity of me as a visual identity, let's say, but also in terms of my education as well. Like, what value could I add, or how would I really understand what somebody's talking about when they're talking about offshore engineering? So I think there was a level of cautiousness as well, in some ways as well, and that I did feel the need to prove myself to some extent, which was in a way a good thing, because I then focus on competence and then trying to do it consistently, and then a bit of humor as well. That this guy is not overly religious, and you can't talk to me about various topics at home, or and I can't relate to you, and I threw myself into every course I could. I did. I was a radiation protection supervisor. I did level 2 and 3, 4, I think, as well, of working at height. I did the first aid initial, and then the advanced one. This is all going off my CV somewhere. I got various ISO certifications, prints too. In any course I could do, I was an emergency response team member, and then team leader, and then I then did my controlling emergencies course as well. And I got signed off quite quickly. So and then I know all these courses that Shell make you go through, because I kind of follow the graduate training of your production operations engineer as well. So I had to do stuff on production chemistry, to reservoir engineering, geology, geophysics, petrophysics, all of it. So I threw myself in, committed, 2-footed tackle, basically. I really wanted to understand engineering as much as I could. And I've never told anybody this, but I even threw myself in my time off to also do some extra courses at B&Q. So B&Q used to do this, like, paint a plaster, fixing a door. I'm not joking, basic plumbing, changing a washer on a tap. I did not changing light bulbs, but literally basic wiring, fitting a door, using various tools by hand, just so that I could. Well, I wanted to do it for my own home. By the way, I bought my first home, when I started working offshore. But the thing was that I just wanted to get hands on and get my brain to think in a technical way about measuring things and drawing things and planning ahead, getting the right materials at the right spot at the right time, and just getting that dexterity with your hands, really. It's very embarrassing if you're on a night shift. Big shout out to Kevin Bryce here. I remember having to turn some valves, seawater valves that were quite big, 8-inch, and I couldn't turn them the first time. I just couldn't. And okay, he used to go to gym every day. He's quite a strong lad, but you have to have some level of strength, right, to do things. Right? I'll be honest with you, I wasn't the most strong, athletic guy, but I felt that I needed to be consistently competent as well, right? And I didn't want to just be the Sikh guy offshore. That's not who I am. I'm just part of the crew.
Yeah.
It's the same as you. I eat a bit differently to you. The guys, I integrated quite well. The guys when they used to get off the helicopter, they go, "Come on, Mandeep, let's get you a vitamin overdose," right? As in, like, they'll go for their beers and they'll just get me orange juice with, lemonade or whatever, into or whatever. Fine, I mean, it didn't matter to them that I was not drinking a beer per se, but I was part of the crew, and so they used to just call it a vitamin overdose, So it was just, and then you knew that when they had little nicknames for you or little phrases for you, that you knew you were part of the team. So, but it was initially a very much an imposter syndrome on steroids in some way, but and as time has gone on, things have got easier or evolved as time has gone on as well, as I've got more senior.
Yeah, What do you think the toughest lessons you learnt though about leading people when you became more senior?
I think that one of the tougher things is to be able to, and I'm still learning this as well, is to be able to be a man of the people, but at the same time detached from it as well. I think that's one thing, because everybody's got their own um, agenda for working offshore, whether it's money, it's a time off, or it's a skill that they want to go upwards in their careers, etc. I think that whilst I talk about competency, I think it's also the speed of delivery matters as well. Um, and I think it's also don't let labels define you. Despite me jokingly saying I'm a turban bearded brown guy or whatever, some kind of flavor of that, the thing is that I'm just a human being and so is the other person. So just be authentic. People will judge you based on your contribution and not your appearance. There will be, I'm not going to discount it for everybody in the world, but most of the time people are not going to judge you for appearance. And where they do, then as leaders, then we have to empower those people to speak up and then stand by them as well. But I think offshore culture values competence and trust above everything else. And if I can earn those, if everybody can earn that, then you'll belong.
What does the future hold for Mandeep?
What does the future hold for me? At the moment, I'm the director of operations for the MENA region for Swagelock in the Middle East and North Africa. We've just gone through a bit of a restructure, and so I'm now looking for my next role, if I'll be very honest. So those who are listening, if you've got networks or you have roles or support that you require in the GCC or the Middle East, or particularly Dubai or Abu Dhabi, shameless plug, I'm looking for my
next... there you go, plug away.
Yes, so I'm looking for my next role. Whilst I talk a lot about technical things and commercial things or digital things, whilst I have a lot of blessings from the fact I've worked in oil and gas and consulting, it is a double-edged sword, and the double-edged sword, the slight negative thing is that someone with my kind of breadth of experience, when it comes to AI or applicant tracking systems or HR, bless their souls, are going through a CV and they want somebody working in a certain role and they've ticked a certain box because they've worked in supply chain, finance, engineering, or whatever, but verticals, right, in a certain career. I don't tick those boxes. I'm very open and honest about that. I'm a generalist. I turn my hands to most things. So that makes it a challenge for the initial stage. And then when I get into an interview, then, I tend to interface a lot better because then they see that I'm a problem solver. I can take opportunities forward. I'm quite strategic as well. So, yeah, that's what the future holds, is hopefully another role for me. I am talking to somebody who's saying to me, Mandeep, you should start your own business. I'm not quite sure what that will look like. There's various ideas. So I was working for Swagelock, which is a fluid system expert, metals manufacturing of valves and fittings and supplies, tubing and whatnot, and many more other things that they do. So I never worked in metals before. I used a lot of the Swagelock materials when I was working offshore as a bit that goes into a pipe or instrument tubing and whatnot. So I like to think that I'm quite dexterous. So let's see, if my phone hopefully gets a few emails or phone calls, that'd be fantastic.
To be honest, Mandeep, I'm similar. I've done quite a range of different roles and whatnot, and I was on a job, I can't remember when it was, and someone actually said to us that sometimes you need someone from those different areas that have seen different things, because if you're a company that's been stuck in your similar ways for quite a while and you're doing similar things, as you could bring someone in from another company that does something similar and that, they'll change certain things, but you can also get a lot of culture differences from people that have done a multiple of different things. And I've done decommissioning, commissioning, well services, fire protection, that I've kind of moved around over the time as well. Now, obviously, the last few years I've gone into renewables, but I've done different things in renewables. But I think and I'll never forget, a supervisor, one of the first supervisors I had when I first went offshore, he said, if you're willing to work hard and put your back into it and really get a hold of the thing and take it by the scruff of the neck and just be willing to learn. I actually think offshore offers a really good opportunity for you to jump around, and I think the industry as a whole, maybe not something, I don't know enough about the office to kind of speak for them, but especially offshore, I think being diverse in your approach helps massively. It's done me a world of good. It doesn't really bother me when people say, "Oh, you moved around." That doesn't bother me one bit. The experiences I've had, a lot of 33-year-olds probably couldn't say the same thing, but it's really, really paid off for myself. And I've never really struggled, going about because of it. And I'm on board with obviously the CV side of things. Someone goes, "Oh, that's not generic enough for us," but it helps. I honestly, it's helped me a wonder as a day rater. As a contractor, it's done me an absolute world of good, because sometimes say for example you're doing well services for a while, and you go away and you go do something else, and you come back in, because you've been away from it. When you go back to it, you're almost quite sharp. You don't get complacent or anything like that, because you've not done it for a wee while. So when you're back into it, you're straight on the ball. You're asking the right questions again. And I think it does pay off massively. I really do. I know some people will stay in drilling or something for 30 odd years or something like that, and that's what they're interested in. And then obviously, as long as they're happy, that's all that matters. But yeah, I'm on board with that. I think it takes people quite far. I think it helps a lot.
Yeah, I mean, the best area authority I worked with was a guy who worked as I think it was a deputy plant manager in the northeast of Scotland at a nuclear site. I think it's Dunray, I believe. Steve Cowie, I think his name is. Anyway, amazing gentleman. Never worked offshore oil and gas. Never worked in oil and gas onshore either. And one of the most impressive characters I've ever worked with in terms of like the questions he would ask, the perspectives he would bring, the fact that he had that attention to detail because he worked on a nuclear plant. Nobody wants to have a nuclear incident, obviously. And the way he would pick up things was just extraordinary. I mean, so I take examples from other people. There's people from ICI. Big shout out to the guys from Middlesbrough all around the world. Or from Hartlepool and whatnot, that they had worked at ICI or adjacent companies, and they transferred their instrument knowledge or process knowledge from there to work at Shell or BP or Conoco or Chevron or other companies all around the North Sea, all around the world. So I think having that diversity is not just about color. I'm not an ethnic minority tick box hire. I never was. It didn't happen that way. If anybody's ever wondering, it's never. I don't think it's ever opened up a door. If anything, it's actually invited questions in an interview or about a site with a. Oh, do you wear a hard hat, man? I had this recently in Abu Dhabi at a company I won't name. I mean, it's fine. People have curiosities and questions and assumptions, so having, bringing diversity to solve a problem. The world is so interconnected, right? You no longer can you just think in one certain way, and it's mathematically and through economics and many other sciences proven again and again, even in biology, having diversity in a gene pool and everything else to fight infections, to having diversity to solve economic problems, to maximize your stock returns for your pensions, whatever it is, diversity actually gives you better results. It's proven time and time again. So it's not a bad thing. I think that's it's also part of the challenge of leading people as well. There's people who are technically brilliant. It doesn't always equal alignment. And I think the hardest lessons from what I'm talking about is navigating sometimes the personal agendas and politics while keeping the team focused on the outcomes and the purpose. So what I've then learned is then having that clarity of purpose and private conversations often then resolve these type of confrontations and issues, right? So, it's not to be afraid of the challenge. The world is moving, ever rapidly with technology. But at the same time, having people who can understand and fit in and celebrate that diversity of thought is really going to solve tomorrow's challenges. It really is.
Yeah, I know. I'm totally on board with it, 100%. It's just a shame, unfortunately. Obviously, diversity now has been taken into totally other contexts in terms of the DEI and whatnot. I don't know enough about it to kind of around, but being diverse in what you can do, I think helps a massive amount. Honestly, really do. So I used to have an old question, but I changed it for my kind of closing question. So I think you're the second one that I'm asking. But if you're looking back now on your career, is there any one moment that stands out as your proudest?
Ooh, from a piece of advice I would give myself, I'd give it to myself even today to a certain extent, but I think is being patient. Early in my career, I thought progression was about, really about speed and titles. Until I was 26 or so, I always had kind of mapped out where I'm going to be in the next 2 years, 6 months, 1 year, whatever it was, and what I'm going to have in my bank account or salary and whatnot. Now I know that it's really about breadth of experience and relationships. It really is.
Yeah.
So if I could go back, I'd probably tell myself, slow down, listen more actively. I think I was doing a lot of that, but I was speaking more as well. And then value the people as much as the projects. I think I've really, from the age of 32, 35 onwards, I've really taken that on board more and more. In terms of a standout moment in my early career, I think it comes down to two things. It comes down to one technical and one personal one, if you don't mind indulging me, Joe.
Yeah.
I think a technical one was that I'm most proud of from a technical perspective was when I worked on the Anastasia FPSO. It's my first FPSO that I worked full time, with hands-on tools. Okay. And within 9 months of starting my competencies as a technician, really, I got signed off as somebody who could control emergencies offshore. Okay. So control room and all stations. Yeah. So
good on you.
That was something I didn't expect. I actually went on a training course, and they turned the training course into an assessment. And I passed every exercise. I say that it sounds like I have ego, but it's the truth. I passed. I think on day one, I had 7 exercises. I did everything from a scaffold collapse to a gas release to an explosion to a ship collision. All these different scenarios that they throw at you. You don't know what you're going to face, by the way. I passed every single one of them on day one. And day two, they said, well, we're scratching our heads here. You've not worked offshore very long, but you're passing everything. So do you want to go and do an assessment? I said, yep, I'll do it. So I passed. So that was that's probably my proudest technical achievement. And I think from a people perspective, it's actually quite a quasi sad one. As we all like our tab nabs offshore. So for those who's not worked offshore, basically break time in between breakfast and lunch, you have a break and
a nice healthy snack.
A nice healthy snack. And Mike, snack was it used to be Lee and Perrin's equivalent on a cheesy toasty, basically. Anyway, so I'm picking it upstairs into my office. I was a client rep on the Curlew FPSO, so this is my 3rd trip offshore. Okay, so very early in my career offshore as an engineer. So I was going up to my office, and as I walked in, I saw somebody in his 50s. I was only 26 or so, 27, and I saw somebody's twice my age almost, sitting in my office, gray-haired, crying, a gentleman. And I very quickly closed the door behind me and gently said to him, whatever his name was, he knows who he is. Are you okay? And he very frustrating. He's very frustrated, and he almost banged his fists on the table, and says, "I need to get off this bloody rig, and nobody's helping me. I've been trying to get off for the last 3 days." And so, I had to ask him some questions to find out more and keep it, civil and polite and calming. Found out that his father-in-law was passing away. He was on life support. And we were on an FPSO, so we were kind of constrained by weather more than you would with a concrete leg or a steel jacket platform. So we couldn't get a helicopter on board for various reasons, but also capacity and whatnot. And I kid you not. So the last conversation I had with my mentor, Ray, who I mentioned earlier, before he left, he was mentoring me on this rig. Well, I said, what do you do if there's an emergency and you have to get people medevaced or get them off a rig? And he said to me, what you do is you go down to the control, you call in logistics onshore, okay, to arrange a helicopter. But in parallel, you radio through all the oil rigs around you in the North Sea. Right? And you ask if anybody's got one seat or however many seats you need, and you ask for a seat to be given up, or if you can get a helicopter to come to your rig and take someone. Now, I never thought of that. So I was told this, and it was just like a mental note to myself that if this ever happens in 5 years or 20 years' time, this might be a good lesson to keep in my mind as to what I do. I didn't know that the next trip, my first trip on my own, by the way, right, my third trip overall, that I was going to have to rely on that knowledge. So I then literally, after the phone call onshore, they were trying to find a helicopter space to come. I then went down to the control room and asked the control room operator to call every oil rig in our vicinity, 20, 30 miles around us. Managed to get one seat. That's all I needed, one seat.
Yeah.
Got that gentleman on that chopper. When he landed, I gave him a call on his mobile phone, and he realized, and I realized, that he didn't have his credit cards with him, and he needed to get a taxi all the way down to Manchester. Now, I was on the graduate scheme here at Shell. Now, it's generally well paid, but it's not your average offshore wage. I say that.
Yeah.
So I said to the taxi company, they said they need somebody physically present to pay. Now, I begged them basically. I said, guys, just take me, who I work for, call my company, take my credit card, please take it, process the payment. I don't care if it costs £200-300 or however much it costs. Put it on my credit card. I'm paying for this gentleman to get back to. So anyway, I was in a very unfortunate car accident. Fast forward 2.5 months later. Okay, so tragedy in my own life. My uncle passed almost in my arms. This is literally 2 days before I got married. Okay, so it's a bit of personal life story here. I was in a car accident. My sister was with me. She was in intensive care. My brother-in-law, my future brother-in-law at the time, he was driving the car. He was in intensive care. And my uncle, he faced the brunt of the collision, and he nearly passed away. So, and he did pass away eventually, shortly after. I was the only one who walked out the car like I look today. Absolutely fine. I got an email in my darkest moment in my life from that gentleman, coincidentally, when I didn't know if my marriage was going to go ahead, because now I was looking after a funeral for my uncle. Got a sister in intensive care, a future brother-in-law in intensive care as well. Wedding's about to be called off. It's like, I believe in God, right? So I got an email in my inbox on my phone from that gentleman, very long email, thanking me profusely for getting him to his father-in-law, because only 10 minutes after he arrived, I still have this email, 10 minutes after he arrived, after he said goodbye, they switched off the life support machine and he passed away. So sadly, he did pass away. And I sat there, just when I read that email, I didn't know if my marriage was going to go ahead the next day or not. It was that one ray of sunshine, you can say, one ray of light from God or whatever, that kind of made me feel a bit better. And that was a bit about, we talk about camaraderie offshore and things like that. He didn't work for my company. He worked for Maersk FPSOs at the time. I worked for Shell. I was a client rep. But for me, building relationships and genuinely doing so based on human values. He's a Facebook friend of mine now. I hope he sees it. I really thank him for, giving me the opportunity to help him. And that is my proudest personal level thing I've ever achieved in my life, was getting somebody home at a very critical time. And then it came round to me. I needed the mental support in a way at a very dark time. Just before I got married. My marriage did go ahead, I'm happy to say. But getting that email was something that really lifted my spirits from the depths, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, it's a lovely way to sign off as well, is it, Mandeep? That is nice. Yeah. Not much else I can really say about that. That's a nice way to sign it.
No, thank you.
And thanks so much thank you so much for coming on. It's been brilliant. I've really, really enjoyed it.
Oh, no, same here. Thank you, Joe. And thank you to all the audience who have bared with me as well. And also to all the unsung heroes who have begged, coached, cajoled, pulled me aside and told me off all these years in my career. I really thank you from the bottom of my heart. I thank my wife, very important, because she's part of my career journey and still is with me somehow. So, it's been a wonderful journey so far. I'm 39 years old. And where will I end up in the future? God knows. But Thank you to everybody in consulting as well. Huge thank you to people like Marlon Richardson, who gave me a lot of his time as well, and Fergus Woodward, who's very patient and also taught me a lot of things as well. So incredible. It's about people, guys. It really is.
Yeah.
As Chris would say, Chris Ray, it really is about people. And I think if we all, whether we're politicians or we're, somebody in the deck crew or a cleaner or OIM or, any discipline, working on wind turbines, working on supply ships, working for small little vendors, family businesses, whoever you are, every one of you, has something valuable to contribute to the energy industry. So thank you for all of those I've met and all of those who supported me who I've not met as well. Thank you.